Hi there, it's Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. This is the kind of slightly more masculine card that we are going to be creating today with these really cool faux screw heads on it, which I really like the look of. We're going to start off. I have a few pieces here. I have a 110-pound Nina Solar white card base. I have an 80-pound Nina Solar white piece of card front. And then I have this turquoisey coloured card front and a black piece. So all of these measure 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I'm just going to pull out a frame here. Now this one is quite large from the Hero Arts Infinity die set. I just want a really thin frame that is going to be a black layering mat really, so I can use the middle for something else. It's just saving on cardstock really. And then I'm just going to cut a tiny bit off the edge of that white piece, and this will be layered on top of the black in a little bit. So you can see here I'm adding the black frame, and that's purely, as I said, just as a matting layer. And you can see how the white one will fit on top. Then I need to make this turquoise layer. Now this turquoise layer is going to turn into a frame. So I am just cutting off the outside so that it sits nicely inside of the white piece. So you can see all three of them are going to layer up there together. And then I'm going to take a much smaller rectangle and die cut it from the center of the turquoise piece. And as I said, this is what will create a frame. Once I have die cut that frame, I'm going to emboss it. This embossing folder is from AliExpress, and I will link it down below in case you are interested. So I've just run that through my die cutting machine, and you can kind of see here the pattern, although it doesn't stand out too much. So if I just want to bring out that pattern a little bit more, I am going to take some Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide ink and kind of gently rub it over top of that pattern. So if you can see here when I kind of bring it up to the left of the screen a little bit, you can really see the difference between the top and the bottom as to how it kind of brings out those stripes. So that's the aim of what I'm doing here. It's not really to change the color of the paper itself. It does slightly, but it's more to bring out the pattern. So I'm going to use this background die and die cut it from a fresh piece of 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch black cardstock. And then we have the frame that I created earlier, and this is the black piece from inside of that tiny skinny wee frame that we created at the very beginning. I want to layer one on top of the other, but in order for the first black to stand out, I'm going to be using this little Semco pearlescent paint set. Now, for anybody who lives in New Zealand or maybe Australia, I purchased this from our Spotlight stores, and it was $5. That's not on special. It was just $5, which is kind of unusual for Spotlight. But anyway, I purchased it to give it a go. And if it wasn't going to be great, then I will just give it to my daughter. But I do like this kind of champagne color that I'm using here. The pigment is not super strong. If I'm honest, it's kind of you get what you pay for, but I did really like this. Kind of happened by accident, and so that's why I decided to make a card out of it. But yeah, I really like kind of, it's almost a faux metal look, I think, anyway. So I'm going to heat set it just because I'm impatient, and just going to stamp out a little sentiment that says happy birthday to you on a scrap piece of black cardstock, and just white heat emboss it. This card was completely inspired by a card that I published not too long ago where I created a frame from that background die, and there was a leftover piece in the middle of it, and it just looked so pretty. So that's exactly where I got my inspiration from for today's card. So now it's just kind of pretty much a case of putting everything together. I don't need the outside of this card, that's why I didn't bother making sure it was all painted nicely. In fact, I really just need a little bit in the middle. This is the black piece that we cut from the tiny frame from earlier at the very beginning of the video, and I'm just putting some double-sided tape around it so that I can adhere that background die on. Just because I have added water to it, I'm going to add some liquid glue so it sits down nicely. I want it to sit flat on that back layer, but around the outside it will be all glued down by that double-sided tape. So looking good, and then I'm just going to work on the frame. This is some fun foam. This was just a spare piece that I had and it wasn't big enough to cover the background, but I'm just going to cut it into strips so that it can pop up this frame. Add a little bit of liquid glue and then just kind of shift these around and cut off little bits, and we have a nice popped up frame. I guess if I had a whole piece of foam I would just die cut it with the rectangles, but you make do with what you've got. So there you go, you can see it coming together, adding liquid glue to that one and then add it on top. I'm adding quite a bit of liquid glue because of the texture to that piece underneath it. Now, if I'd known what I was doing, I actually would have added some of the details earlier before I stuck the fun foam down to the frame, but I didn't. I was just, as you do in card making, going with the flow of what I was creating. So I'm going to put the card kind of mostly together now. But as I said, I probably would have done it in different steps had I known, but that's okay. That's not always the case. So I'm adding that white matting layer that we created earlier, and then exactly the same with the little frame and kind of centerpiece that we also created. And then I'm just going to add the sentiment and the final touches. I got these from AliExpress. Now these are really cool brads. They are like screwdriver heads. I guess they're like a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver head. So one has like the little cross and then one has just the straight piece of top. But I felt like these would be the perfect little accent to add to this card to go with the kind of metallic look that I have. So I'm just going to poke holes here. Now this is two ways to do things because I figured something out in a minute that was even smarter. But anyway, I've pierced a hole in each end of my sentiment, which reaches just across the middle of that turquoise frame. And I'm just going to fold both of the legs of the brad inwards, so not one facing in each direction. Here's where I figured out that I can actually just use my snips to snip off the outside parts, and then I kind of just gently bend in the little sharp bits to the left. If I'd known this in the beginning, I probably would have done it to all of them, but that's okay. So you can see there's the front, the back, and then the front. So I did that to 4 more of them, and they will go around the outside of the card. So you can see there that the little legs are bent in, and I'm just going to use some hot glue to adhere that down to the center. And then I'm also going to use the hot glue to adhere each of these little brads to, and as I said, if I had known what I was doing earlier, I may have actually put them through that turquoise layer. I mean, it worked out fine in the end, don't get me wrong, but sometimes don't you wish that you had realized at an earlier stage just where the card was heading? Anyway, that was the card for today. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye.